So those blends can create risk, and in many ways, firms over here, customers over here, are looking for nearshore skills. They're looking for nearshore resources, and I've tried to craft, my view of what's going on here. In many ways, we saw previously how some of those other famous nearshore destinations like Poland, the Czech Republic, Romania play out in terms of costs. Those really are the mature nearshore delivery hubs, and they sit in Eastern Europe. So Poland has very much become a BPO resource. So a lot of companies have put out their BPO operations around, Katowice and Krakow, into Warsaw and so on and so forth. That really has become, Europe's business process outsourcing hub. And you can look at the finance and accounting work that's going on there. You can look at some of the HR transformation work that's going on out there, and look at the way the vendors have, moved their model in that direction in order to capitalize on some of the skills and capacity there. Russia is very rich in software development and expertise, but if you get outside the two metropolitan areas of St. Petersburg and Moscow, there isn't too much going on beyond those metropolitan areas. Spain, well, we talked about Spain's industry expertise. We had an overview of some of the big heavyweights, which are, frankly, I think, punching above their weight. If you look at Grupo Santander, if you look at the world of retail, Zara, and I can't pronounce the headquarters, Inditex, I think they're called. Okay, some nods from the Spanish folks here. Okay, Inditex, you look at the ways they've organized their supply chain. You look at renewables industry. I mean, this is going to be colossal in the future. Spain sources something around 30 to 40% of its power from renewables. And you look at the companies which are active over here in the UK, Endesa, Iberdrola, they're all moving in, and they're all going to bring that expertise into the UK economy. So I think there's some really interesting industries in Spain, and there's no surprise to me that this is where the vendors are starting to put specific centres of gravity, if you will, or specific centres of expertise to try and tap into some of those skills as they emerge. I think many of the traditional service providers have gone into Eastern Europe, so they've gone into Poland, they've gone to Czechoslovakia. But in many ways that was almost 4 or 5 years ago now. And I wonder if labour arbitrage is a 5-year love affair, that after 5 years those savings start to dissipate and the vendors need to think, well, what can they really bring to their clients that Poland has as a country or the Czech Republic has as a country. I think the Indian pure plays have gone further east. They've gone to Romania, they've gone to Bulgaria. Outside Bucharest, Bucharest is an extremely cosmopolitan capital. Lots of languages being spoken there, and that seems to become a location for service desk. And what I think a lot of customers look for is the stability of the country. They look at the quality of the infrastructure, and more importantly for me, they look at the cultural affinity of working with the vendors. So as a customer, you don't buy a country, you actually buy a vendor. So you buy a vendor relationship. Now you can say, countries have specific characteristics and so on and so forth, but in my view, I think you should look at how the vendors work with their customers, what sort of account management procedures do they have in place, and look at the references, the case studies to figure out, well, how would it work? Now what I want to do now is to give you my view of why I think Spain has emerged, and I say has emerged, as a credible offshore destination. In some of the interviews I ran for the paper I reference, and I've got the web link on the end of the presentation. Some of those interviews were really rather interesting into the ways European customers were starting to use these Spanish resources within their global delivery models. And these were banks, these were automotive firms, these were pharmaceutical companies. And what they were telling me was, they really went over-leveraged offshore. They went to India, and they'd actually moved some of that work back to Spain. Some of the high-end SAP architecture work, for example, came back to Barcelona. Some of the F&A transformation work came back to Madrid, with plans to actually move more back to Madrid. So it's interesting for me to see how I think Spain has proven itself to the customers. But as I was telling a couple of colleagues here, all it needs is one small pilot, and I think customers really understand or get it. And in my mind, anywhere in Europe, you ask them who the major IT services vendors in Spain are, the major indigenous vendors in Spain, and there seems to be a lack of knowledge about some of the work they do in healthcare. You know, some of the stats we had about, was it 4 out of 5 planes that land use Spanish software, etc., etc. You look at the way in which, say, the health service, which in Spain, which is world class, and frankly, that's probably why so many geriatrics from the UK emigrate to Spain to try and guarantee they're going to get great healthcare. But one of the reasons is, you know, they use technology, they use processes, they use innovation in technology really well. They really harness it. And I think what you're going to see over the next few years is that start to spread out, not to Latin America, but northwards into Europe, here in the UK, into the Nordics, into Germany as well. So I really do think Spain's going to capture more spending, I think, from sourcing professionals, more spending from business process executives. And I think one of the reasons is the skills. One of the reasons anyone offshores is cost and skill and scale. So 3 things, and I think Spain has got all 3. Now I've been looking at some of the rate cards from the Spanish vendors, and what's really interesting for me is they're actually on par with the best, well maybe not the best, but the average which India can provide. Now that's really interesting. And when you actually factor in some of the overhead costs and some of the governance and some of the, you know, account management you need when you manage an offshore partner, then those costs start to look more and more attractive. There is a large skilled IT labour pool, and we're going to look at some of those ratios afterwards. They have these, what they call software factories, that no one else in Europe knows what they are, but in Spain, they're basically industrialised software manufacturing. And they really do deliver low rates, and they really do deliver high skills. So you've got the labour pool, you've got this infrastructure of software development, and you've also got this domain expertise. These so-called, what I would call Spanish heavyweights, which are punching above their weight on the world stage. And perhaps most intriguing is a potential to scale with Latin America. Now, I'm doing a lot of interesting calls with some of the larger companies in Europe who are asking about, can they source skills from Argentina, can they source skills from Uruguay, Chile, etc., etc. So there seems to be a desire to try and explore some of these new locations around the world as a source for global IT services. And I think there is, I mean, I would like the ValueShore guys to actually talk about some of this stuff, about the possibility or maybe some insights into how this Spain-Latin American delivery model can work. Because I know of indigenous Mexican vendors who are now moving into Europe through Spain, so they're almost going the other way, where they've won a lot of business in serving customers in North America, in Mexico, and they're starting to figure out, can they take their business over here to Europe? Now, it seems to me what the Spanish indigenous vendors should be doing is figuring out how they can leverage some of those resources in Argentina and deliver some of those benefits here to European customers.